Huh. I never was much into games like The Sims. Black Mirror. And we continue this time looking at Plaything. Now, the general impression that I get, now this, I have not actually read reviews, but because as I've been going, I have been sort of checkboxing off and going to Letterbox to, mark this stuff as watched so I can take it off my watch list. I have noticed that I'm pretty sure this one has the lowest score on Letterboxd of the season. That said, I think it's still over 3.0 last I checked. So that's still solid. Usually it's only when you get under a 3 that you need to start really worrying about something. I'm pretty sure I know why. And I have a strong suspicion that it just has to do with the point at which it chose to end. Notice that I didn't say the ending, because I don't think people objected to the ideas of what was going on at the ending. I think a lot of people were probably just thrown off at the specific moment in time it chose to finish. And I won't lie, it threw me off a little bit too. I was expecting a little more than that, but the more that I think about it, I'm not sure more than that was needed. But it was jarring at the same time, to be sure. But that's kind of a spoiler discussion. Pin it, we'll come back to it, maybe, if I actually have anything other to say than what I've already said. But in any case, this is a pseudo follow. Well, I call it more of a spin-off from Bandersnatch. It is exploring. It brings back some of the characters. The boss and what was his name? Colin? I think it was Colin, or it was Cameron. I forget. Like there's our main character who is a writer for a video game magazine in the 90s, and then there's the programmer. One of them is Colin, one of them is Cameron, and I can't remember which is which. In any case, the programmer is a carryover character from Bandersnatch, and he's an interesting one to carry over because he was the blonde guy who was not the central character there, and he's not the central character here either, but he is the one who's kind of suggesting some of the nature of what was going on in that story, or at least some of the possibilities of what was going on in that story. Bandersnatch was an interesting experiment, but it was weird, man. I've never really gone back to it, although I will look at the flow chart of how the story can go sometimes. In any case, he's back, and he has programmed a new game that is behaving a little oddly, but that's largely in flashback because we start with my favorite doctor, Peter Capaldi, as a much older version of the writer for the video game magazine. And I like Peter Capaldi. I like Peter Capaldi in anything. And he does good work here. I'm not sure it's a part that takes full advantage of what he's capable of, but what he does here, he does well. He's a bit more understated than he can often be, and a bit less imposing. The man kind of has a natural intimidation style charisma that he just kind of has, and he's able to dial it back for this, which that's no small thing for a guy like that. So that worked pretty well. That was pretty impressive. Some of the technological aspects are actually rather interesting. I like that early on. What we basically find out is, he gets initially stopped by the police for attempted shoplifting. But then when they swab his DNA in accordance with, I don't know, some act that they name from 2030, whatever, it immediately clocks on an unsolved murder case. And what's interesting about that is we eventually find out that murder case was from back in the 90s. So they've just been keeping the DNA data on hand on the off chance they ever swabbed the person whose DNA was on that body that was found. Like, that's dang. Okay. That's dedication. And oddly, one could argue possibly the most ethical application of a technology like that. which is kind of an interesting thing for Black Mirror to do. Not that it delves into that. That's a side aspect. What we're mostly here to talk about is thronglets and the throng in general. So we have this game where the creatures within it appear to be fully autonomous, thinking, and self-replicating. And the thing is that it is arguable how true that actually is. Like, they certainly think to the extent that a machine thinks, but for the most part, we largely only have the word of the person who programmed it and the experiences of the writer. And I'm going to get more into spoilers now, so be aware from here on, who it has to be on LSD in order to think that he understands what they want from him. And I don't doubt that he does do what they want more or less, but I think it's still debatable as to whether these algorithmically created beings are actually sentient. But again, that's not even a question that the thing gets into, and I actually kind of like that as a background feature. That I think we are certainly invited to believe them to be and to feel for them as they are, as when his friend, quote unquote, Lump, starts messing around with the game and starts just killing them because he thinks it's funny, and seeing them panic. And some of the animations are funny and silly, but they are also genuinely coming across as scared. But is that because they're really scared, or because that's a programmed response? We don't really know. Again, we are invited to perceive them as real, because certainly our lead character does. But it doesn't really confirm that they are. Again, we just kind of have the word of one demonstrably paranoid programmer about all this. Like, he's the only one who has really said that, and this writer certainly takes it on wholeheartedly. I don't usually get hung up on the logistics in stories like Black Mirror, or actually too many stories in general, unless I find myself asking a question that gives me pause while watching it. The one I've ended up asking here is like, wait, what's he doing for work? Because the last thing we saw him do at the magazine did not seem like it was looking good for his continued employment there. How is he affording all this tech? It's not an important question, not really. Within the scope of the story, it doesn't matter. But I did still find myself wondering that a little bit, even though I freely admit that the answer doesn't matter. But it's one of those things where I would have liked to have been more confident that an answer existed. That's kind of my thing sometimes. I don't always need the specifics, but sometimes I need to be confident that the writer knows the specifics so that I know it's not a mistake. And I had a little bit of a moment with that here. The moment that really captured me was towards the end when Peter Capaldi's older version of this character finally gets his hand on a pen and a piece of paper. He draws out this thing that just looks like, I don't know, kind of a busted up maze looking thing, and he shows it to the camera, and it's effectively a QR code to let the throng get into the greater system. And I think probably, and this is me guessing because I haven't read people's reactions, probably what has given this a softer reception than a lot of Black Mirror tends to get is the fact that I think it's pretty indisputable. The thronglets or thronglings, I can't remember now, I think it was thronglets, are definitely now in the heads of humanity. I think probably what gives people pause is the show doesn't really establish if that's a good thing or a bad thing, or what the hell happens next, which is kind of a big question. But the more that I thought about it, the more I kind of realized, you know what? Does it matter, though? these things, whether they are sentient and fully aware and alive in any sense that we tend to think of things as, they certainly now have shared consciousness within humanity. For all intents and purposes, they're real now, no matter what they were before. And in terms of what it drove one man to do, we know the lengths he was willing to go to care for and protect them. The amount of himself and eventually the rest of humanity he was willing to sacrifice and give in order to do what he thought was best for these things and give them what they wanted. And that, I think, is what the story is about. What happens as a consequence of that isn't really on theme. Like, the answer isn't. The answer doesn't affect the theming. That having been said, I think most audiences, when you just hard cut at the point where it did, and you're not like, and here's what this means, but just like, and that happened. Boom. I think a chunk of audiences are going to go like, what? Wait a minute. And I didn't quite have that reaction, but I did go like, oh, okay. We're stopping there. All right. I was half expecting a mid-credits scene or something, but no, that was it. And while I do think it put things in a, I think the abruptness more than anything was just kind of made me go, oh. And I do think it does, even though I kind of defended that choice insofar as I think the answers that we don't get don't super matter, at least to the thematics of the episode. Don't take that as a blanket defense, because I do still feel like the cutoff is real harsh. And I have no problem with sudden harsh cutoffs. I actually, on my main channel, did an entire video talking about really liking harsh cut to black endings when they're done well, and highlighting one in particular in a movie I absolutely love and I think is fully made by that choice of an ending. But that doesn't mean it works every time. And it didn't quite work for me here. I just think it probably didn't work for me to a lesser degree than it didn't work for other people, if I were to guess. And now at this point, I'm like, I'm defending or responding to hypothetical criticisms that I'm not sure exist. Maybe that's a sign I should stop. Playthings. I also just like the title feels like a little bit of a at least a vague link to playtest. So I like that as a choice, considering that there were plenty of other things they could have called it. So I don't know. I kind of like that. What did you think about this episode? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living, even if you can't help me out that way. Like, share, subscribe. Those all help me out. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Quite Bearish, Zubin Litfula, Mara G, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Andre, Movie Turtle, Oliver B, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Mary Mello, Becky Sparks, Loki Eris, Pal Barabajoggle, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. And also Toka Blue Hoovian, Auntie 808, and Tracy Scrabbit. If you'd like to hear me try and pronounce your name correctly while these guys chitter in my ears, check out the reward tiers on the Patreon. Yes, I hear you.